You know what? Let's commit some heresy. Just for fun. Just for funsies. What up, everybody? Scuffy here, back for the third part of the Mechanicum, card by card. It has been a journey. It's been a long water journey. Dry throat, a lot of talking, a lot of cards to cover here. This is part 3 of the Mechanicum card pool. So this is covering cards of energy 7 through 10. Once again, the reason why we broke it up into three parts for the Mechanicum and all the neutrals really is the amounts of cards that are in these factions. Compared to your standard card faction, it's about twice as many, and these are very long videos, so if I can break them up into smaller pieces, that's what I'm going to do. Now, the 7 to 10 pool is where you get the beef. Some of it is good, some of it is Most of it is very powerful if it hits the table, just like any 7+ drop. The question is, some are better than others. Which are the ones that you're going to want to see? Which are the ones that you're going to want to use or pick up in the shop? So that's what we aim to go at. Video 1 covered the Warlords, as well as energy cards all the way up to 2. Video 2 covered cost 3 through 6. Here we go. Energy cost 7. Start with the Defiler Prototype. Now this is a vehicle, which is nice. It's got 7 attack and Bloodthirst, which means if it sticks, it's going to do 14 damage. The problem is it has that 4 health. This is actually pretty nice in decks that you can boost your vehicle's health, or you're able to give this a Forbidden Protocols. Maybe somewhere down the road there'll be a way to give your vehicles stealth, and this will become a problem. But as it is right now, it's not. It's not terrible. It's not a go-to. It's a surprise. It's kind of frustrating when it shows up in events and you don't have a quick answer to it. But that 4 health leaves it vulnerable to a lot of things: tactics, flanking troops, direct damage, etc. So that's exactly what it is. Now the cool thing about this is the Defiler Prototype. We don't have actual Defilers in the game, which it's kind of interesting, given the dark mechanic of the chaos. This is before those happen. This is the prototype for it. Maybe somewhere before the end of the year, we will actually get a Defiler. You never know. The Eviscerator Engine. This is very low statted for its cost, but its cost is not bad if it sticks. The problem is it's susceptible to Ambassador Malgator. 6 health at 7 energy is not great. Pay 2 energy to deal 2 damage to all enemies. If any die, this troop can act again. That's pretty cool. At 8 energy, potentially, you could do 8 damage, clearing out multiple troops each round. Maybe if you really want to do it, you're thinking, oh, well, Salamanders, could use it with the Promethean Gift and reduce the cost of it, but its stats are not great. If you're going to pay 7 for shitty stats, honestly, you should play 6 for shittier stats and get a Salamander faction that can do the same thing with Survivor. So, technically that Survivor 2 gives it 7 health, but broken up in 2 versus 7 health or 6 health at 1 shot. It's not great. I'm not trying to upsell it, just trying to explain to you what it is, what it does. If like I said, if you set the board up right or you hit the right things, you can do a lot of damage with it, but I wouldn't put it in your deck and prioritize around it. It shows up in events sometimes as a draft, and it's kind of a nice distraction for your opponent to deal with because they know they can't put troops down if this is alive, but that's about it. Maniple Gamma Mu, this is a nice front line. You think it's 3-8, but really on your opponent's turn when it matters as a front line, it's a 7-8. That's very nice for anything that wants frontline, large front lines, or has ways to buff vehicles. Ornitov doesn't have to worry about frontline necessarily, but he can drop this at 7 energy and get a very nice frontline troop to protect him. He's a frontline heavy warlord. Proctor can drop this at 7 energy, and then the next turn it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. That 8 health is very nice at 7. It's not bad. As a startup card goes, for a high cost frontline troop, this is fairly good. If you're looking to pick up, or you need something to protect your warlord just a little bit longer at the high end game, consider this. There's better options. Eventually, I think you'll phase out for it, but it's not a bad card. This is not a good card. 7/7 for 7, no game text. Not great. Interestingly enough, there is an exact replica of this card, except now this card has a backlash. Destroy random enemy vehicle. For the longest time, Cargill was just a 7/7. That's it. That's all he was. He was just a big fat 7/7. Now he has a backlash because I think they realized, like, wait a minute, Legion cards should be a little bit better than neutral cards, and this neutral card is not great, so we need to make that better. Spirit of Mars it's got a place if you're doing a heavy Mechanicum troop deck, and that doesn't have to be a Mechanicum warlord. There's a lot of warlords that can build with Mechanicum infantry, Mechanicum vehicles. If you're playing with a lot of those, or even if you're just playing with 3 specific ones, this is not a bad card. The downside is it's at 7 energy, so you are giving up that turn. While you're drawing 3 Mechanicum troops, and maybe you're drawing an Urtzi, a Coriel Zeth, and a Melgator, the only one that you would be able to play that turn is the Melgator. So it's kind of, a trick to play. And as such, like I said, unless you're playing like a very heavy Mechanicum deck, or you've got an energy boost deck, you're playing like Assault Harvest ramp or Thaddeus Fail ramp, where you can get up to 7 energy very quickly before your opponent can get to 5 energy. This might not be bad, but it's not great because it doesn't put them in play. It just reduces their costs. So if you use up all your energy that turn, next turn you can capitalize with it. But you got to be careful. You don't want to dump your hand. Termite Drill is bad. It's bad, guys. It's bad. 5/8 is okay stats for 7. Like, you're really pushing it. Its ability is supposed to make things better. You pay 3 energy to draw an infantry or a Astartes from your deck and give it flank. It's just in your hand with flank, and then it can act again. It's not great. It's a pass. Pass for me, dog. Don't pick this up in the shop. Don't waste gems on this. Maybe somewhere down the road this will get a revision and be slightly better. Maybe if the ability costs 2 energy as opposed to 3, that wouldn't be bad, because at least on the follow-up turn you could put 4 cards in your hand with flank as well as attack for 5. But this is not good. Urtzi is a good meta card. He's a meta choice. He's destroy an enemy vehicle. That's a powerful rally. The 7/4 body is nice, but as I said with the Defiler, the 7/4, the 4 health is a distraction. If anything, if I had to pick one of the two, I'd pick Urtzi over the Defiler, because Urtzi is going to do something when he hits, and he's a legendary, and it's a powerful ability. He can destroy a vehicle. It doesn't matter if it's got frontline. Doesn't matter if it's got survivor. Doesn't matter if it's got shield. Now, if it has ward, he can't target it, and that's a problem. But otherwise, he's an exchange. So he comes into the meta as vehicle-heavy decks, or decks that are using several strong vehicles, rise up, and then you see people get smart to it and start putting Urtzis in their deck for a bit, and then that kind of mellows out. Eventually, the people are able to respond to Urtzi, or they take the Urtzi, or they take the vehicles out of their deck, and then the meta continues to fluctuate. He's a good card for those types of situations, especially just to have in your pocket, to be like, you know what, everybody's playing Learning a Hydra, it's time for me to play Urtzi Malevolus. Or, you know what, everybody's playing Telemon Dreadnought, it might be nice to have Urtzi Malevolus. So that's good, but he's not going to go in your deck all the time. But it is nice. It's a good one worth considering picking up in the shop. Vulture X. Long time ago, this guy's backlash was toned down a bit. It was deal 2 damage to adjacent units. Still a very high damage, high health flanking for when he comes out. But the game has seen better flanks added, better answers added that certainly don't cause the splash damage that Vulture X causes. It's okay. I mean, it's powerful. The Vulture X Stratus Automata in lore are They're drones that just fucking waste things. And as you can see, they got missile pods. He's got was that a plasma cannon in the forefront there. So I mean, they're beefy, which is nice, as they should be. But that backlash really makes it questionable. If you need a good flanking unit at a high cost and your faction doesn't have access to it, you could consider this. But I think eventually you're going to look for better options, whether it's hard removal options or just better ways to build your deck. Vulture X does not see a whole lot of play anymore. You might play Vulture X in Medusan, because Medusan can give your troop flank, or not flank, sneak attack for 1. So that 8 health is going to last a little bit longer. The downside is you're playing that Vulture X at 8 energy to make that possible, which really, is it going to make a difference? I don't know. And you still have something on the board that you have to be careful where you place your troops next to, because he's an explosive ally. Doombringer is probably, I want to say arguably, but he is a very good 8-drop. He is one of the top 8-drop picks for the Mechanicum and for some factions all around. The 7/5 body is not much better than a 7/4 body. But the resolution dealing 2 damage to all enemies is where his upsell is. He hits the board, everything's going to take 2, and now your opponent has to deal with the 7/5. Just like Urtzi hits the board, he destroys a vehicle, your opponent has to deal with the 7/4. They do something the turn that they come out at. Resolution is a very powerful mechanic. It's a very powerful trait. It's awesome. And when you have it on a vehicle that's going to do this every turn, if you have ways to protect this with stat buffs, or giving it survivor, somehow giving it ward, or having it behind frontline, any frontline warlord, Sergeant Cork, Latara Saren, I put it in my Ornithop deck just because my Ornithop deck is more of a challenge, high cost card deployment. But if I've got 2 or 3 7 health front lines, I feel very comfortable putting a Doombringer out there. They're going to be a distraction to your opponent, but they're going to do something, and if your opponent doesn't get rid of it, then they're going to take 7 more attack damage plus another 2 health, and that's 9 more damage, potentially, on the next turn. Very strong. Forge Fane. Now, this is probably a better copy of a card for Medusan than Vulture X. It costs 8. The problem is that he has to play it at 9, because it puts in play 2 Vorax. And in part 2 of the video, I talked about Vorax, Bloodthirsty Flank. Very nice card. Not as good as it used to be, but still very good. Could potentially take out 2 troops, and if you've got 2 of them, that's potentially 4 troops, or at the very least 6 damage to 1 threat. So this isn't bad, but it is for decks that are doing a specific thing. Like if you are playing Leman Russ, and you do not have you don't have the Fenrisian Wolves as a legendary, then that's a great replacement for it. It's the same cost. It gives you 2 troops that flank with Bloodthirst, as opposed to 2 troops that just do it 1 attack with a little bit better stats. So you could potentially get a little bit more value out of that. It's still contingent upon your opponent playing troops, but that's the whole Russ build. That's the Russ concept. So if you don't have that card, if you don't have Fenrisian Wolves and you want to play Leman Russ, or you want to play a couple of the Space Wolves with some of the pack attack abilities, that's not a bad, cheap, rare card to consider throwing in for the time being as a placeholder. But I wouldn't put 2 of them in a deck. Just 1 usually does the trick. Karaknos tank? I mean, here's what I like about it. I like the fact that it specifically deals 4 damage to infantry, Astartes, and Custodes. I mean, very few cards specifically mention Custodes. But they do this because the only things that it's not damaging are vehicles and demons. So that's why they have to do that encompassing. It's not great. I mean, 5/9 for a 2 ability that deals 4 to all, doesn't do damage to the enemy warlord. It's something that you might play if you're playing a high troop cost deployment challenge, or use energy ability, although there's way better ways to do that. Use energy ability challenges. This is just not a great card. They're better 8 cost cards for sure. Coriel Zeth is another fantastic 8 cost card. Again, probably up the top there. It and Doombringer hit the board. Your opponent has to sweat a little. This has got shield. It's got very nice stats. 8 attack, 7 health. With that shield makes it even nicer. But the backlash is really where it's at because it destroys a random enemy troop. So at the very least, your opponent has to be willing to give up a random troop or have no troops on the board and find a way to destroy this before they play a troop. Or you're going to be able to do some damage with it, and then when it dies, it still does a little bit of damage by helping neutralize the board a little bit. Also, just a little lore that Mistress of the Magma City. This character was really cool. She was a loyalist holdout on Mars. And her, I mean, to kind of go with the lore and the fluff, I mean, Magma City was like this awesome forge world. It was her place, and she was holding out against the traitorous Martian adepts, and as a last go, as she was as her forge complex was basically breaking, she released the safety measures, and massive volcano and magma kind of flowed and just like wiped out like half of the attacking forces. So that's the backlash that ties into that. That's where that comes from. It's very thematic. I kind of like that. I like that a lot. And you got John Blanchard, right? I mean, this has got the stuff, baby. She's hot. She's literally hot. Look at the steam. Machinator Squad. I like the idea for this deck. When a friendly vehicle dies, add a Mechandrite to your hand, and it's a very high statted infantry. The problem is, as we mentioned when we were talking about Mechandrites and builds with Mechandrites, is you've got to be careful because Mechandrites don't work on vehicles. So if you have too many vehicles and this in your deck, then really the only thing that you're putting the Mechandrites on is this guy, which is okay. But it also means that you're likely not going to get other infantry to play your Mechandrites, and you're in a problem if he sticks in your hand. And vice versa, if you have too many infantry and no vehicles, then you're not going to get his ability. I think that's okay for a common. It's not bad, especially if you're early game and you're just starting out. You get this guy as a high-cost card. Maybe you have a couple, generic common vehicles for your faction. Maybe you've got, some bikes or some speeders or something. It's a good way to give you, as a newer player, a large cost troop that can be a threat. But, as I said, there's better 8 costs that eventually phase that thing out. Neuroscythe Thanatar, I think, saw a lot more play when we were in the Desperate Defense days because it has shield and it has 9 health. But it's also got a good ability. It's not bad for if you want to play a high-cost beef deck, or if you want to throw down some vehicles. It's really, for me, when I play it, it's because it's been generated by Forge Complex. It's a great troop to get generated by Forge Complex because at that point you're playing the long game, and you can continue to put down a Neuroscythe. Maybe next turn you're throwing down a Doombringer. Next turn you're throwing down a Vulture X or a Creos Zephyr. If you're lucky, if that's what the Forge Complex has been giving you. And your opponent has to respond to this, because if they don't, even if you're not playing a high-cost card, you're dealing 6 damage to a random enemy. And if it's just their Warlord, that's guaranteed 6 damage to them, and this guy just sits back, doesn't have to lose anything. Or it's a troop, and he's got shield. So it's not bad. It's a really nice card. Promethean Refinery. I haven't seen this used yet. This card was just added with the Galaxy in Flames expansion. I like the stats. I like the fact that it has 5 attack. That's very important to keep it away from being returned to your hand by Ambassador Melgator. It has 10 health. That's very nice. But it's so high cost. It's so high cost. And to be fair, for what it does, it should be high cost. But I just don't know if there's anything to do with this unless you have a specific deck where you plan on playing this at like 4 energy or 5 energy with solid targets. I don't see any other way, unless I should clarify. Maybe this is a bit of a stretch because it's really wombo combo-y. But if you're playing the Agents of the Sigilate and you have the not the Secret Unification, where is it? Secret Seal of the Administratum. You can make that a 0-cost card and deploy it for, basically you're paying 3 energy to play that card. That's cool, but those seals are created randomly, so there's no guarantee that that's exactly what you're going to get. But its ability, For free, basically, you're refilling for energy. It allows you to pump out more stuff, do more things. That's very cool, especially in this day where now the drilling site has been changed, and you don't get that from a tactic. You don't get 2 energy for free. You just get a little, turn boost. This is a way to get energy for free, but it is coming at a cost, and I think it's a little hard to pull off. I'd like to see a deck that makes use of it, at least run for a little bit, but I haven't yet, and I think even on paper it's pretty shabby. It's pretty sus, pretty hard to guarantee. Telemat, another great energy. Now this is the demon. This is it. Mechanicum has a demon. People miss this sometimes, but it's true. Another Blanchard. I mean, this is a demon, folks. It's a 7/8 body, very nice, and it's got an awesome rally effect. Stuns all enemy vehicles, structures, and Titan weapons. I really like having this in those high-cost troop build decks. Ornitov keeps this in a pinch against some matchups where, my opponent has got a couple vehicles. I'm like, okay, well now they're all stunned, and I'm going to give this guy frontline. And then the next turn, I've got my second one in hand. Telemon is nice for those particular decks, or maybe, as I said, if you don't have Urtsy Malevolus, that's an alternate option for dealing with vehicles if they are frustrating to you. There are only a few structures that actually are worth stunning, that actually have abilities that do something. A lot of structures are relentless. A lot of structures are going to play. This is not going to do anything against defensive turrets for the Imperial Fist. This is not going to do anything against Mount Pharos. But against a couple specific structures, this could be handy. But mainly it's against enemy vehicles, and Titan weapons is really where it has the pinch, and some nice stats. It's a good card to consider. Abominable Intelligence is a monster. Whether or not you put it in your deck or not is up to you. It has shield, it gains shield, and attacks by itself at the start of its turn. It's very hard to get rid of this without hard removal. Because you can whittle it down its health a little bit, but then on its turn, it's going to attack without repercussion. And then it's vulnerable, but then you still have to do 9 or more or less damage, depending on where it's at. As I said, it's up to you if you put it in your deck. I usually get this card generated by Forge Complex, and it's nice when it does, but if I'm playing an Ornitov, this is a great card to throw into Ornitov because it's got shield, it's got stats, you pay 1 energy, and now it's a frontline. That's why people used it with the Desperate Defense. It was ridiculous. But also, the attack by itself is tricky because if your opponent can't remove it, if you can just throw up a front line, Flatara Saren just uses her ability to generate a 2/3. She's bought herself some time. That's all she's got. I mean, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to shut this guy down, but she's bought herself some time. The attacks by itself can be worked around, but it's hard to ignore the stats on this thing. This is nice. I don't know if I'd recommend getting it from the shop. Like, if you had other cards that you have got on your list that you would rather have, and not just Mechanicum, but faction cards, I'd recommend getting those before you get the Abominable Intelligence. But it's not a bad card as opposed to Termite Drill, which is something I would just recommend hard passing on. And if you get it in a crate, my condolences. Creos Venator. It's a fat cannon. That's all I gotta say about it. Deal 3 damage 3 times. Okay, so for 4, you're dealing 9 damage. That's nice. It's a high cost ability, but it's nice. It's a common. It's a large vehicle. A lot of the stuff in here, I'm gonna be honest with you. I mean, these high cost cards, with every faction, high cost cards are high statted, and they put out some output. But because they don't have a rally effect, or they don't have a resolution, or they don't have a passive ability, those ones just tend to score less. And this has got an activated ability, which is nice, but it's a high cost activated ability. Telemot, Coriel Zeth, I'm giving higher scores or recommendations because they're doing something when they hit the board for you, or they're putting pressure on your opponent in a way, that they have to respond, or they have to plan carefully. Creos Venator, if I don't deal with it, I'm going to take 9 damage. Okay, not a big deal, but maybe I can stun it, maybe I can jam it, maybe I can, do something to negate what it wants to do. I have a harder time doing it with something that's already hit me or impacted the board. Lambda Zeta 5 kind of falls under, or Lambda Zeta 01, Seeker Robot, kind of falls under that same concept. Your opponent can respond to it. They know that if they don't, this thing is going to be mean and nasty. The trick with these high-cost cards, if you want to play more than one of them, is to build a particular deck. Thaddeus Fail, like I said, Saltarvitz, General Ornitop, cards that can ramp their energy and or have a way of playing cards at reduced cost and then continuing to do that, because let's say your opponent gets rid of your Maniple Gamma move, and then the next turn they get rid of your Doombringer, and then the next turn you drop Alernia Hydra and they have to get rid of that. Then the next turn you drop Coriel Zeth. They're running out of resources. That is a deck type in of itself that can really use, multiples. I can run a bunch of Telemots, Coriel Zeth, Lambda Zeta, Abominable Intelligence, really with a particular deck, because I know once I hit 8, 9, 10 energy, that's when the damage is going to hit, but I'm vulnerable until then. So if you want to play this effectively, your best bet really is to have some other large stuff or other things that your opponent is going to have to burn resources on before you play this. But I will say that some of these vehicles, that vehicle in particular, works very nicely, if you must, with the Thunderhawk 1169. Draw and put into play a random vehicle from your deck and give it flank. Boom. So now I've got a flank cleave 5. I think Iron Hands generally would like to play Atlas Astra with that instead, but just the same, there are some options in there. If you're going to play that card, maybe you want to play one of those vehicles. Maybe it's worth playing Abominable Intelligence to give it flank. Doesn't attack by itself with flank, so yeah, something. It's a thought. Lucas Krom is understated, but he does have an interesting Relentless, but he doesn't do a whole heck of a lot if you've got other troops. I like the artwork here. I think actually I remember seeing somebody online do a miniature of Lucas Krom, which really was cool. Some more Blanche art, some more Blanchinisms. Yeah, so Lucas Krom, Relentless. If you control no other troops, you put in play a Kaban Machine. We'll just go right to Kaban Machine. 10/10 with shield, attacks by itself at the start of its turn. So the only difference between Abominable Intelligence and the Kaban Machine is the fact that the Kaban Machine doesn't get shield after the first time. But that 10/10 attacking by itself is brutal. So if Lucas Krom is the only troop that you've got out there, your next turn, you get a Kaban Machine. Now, the problem is that Kaban Machine still has Summoning Sickness, so it doesn't attack. You don't get to use it. It just puts it into play. So there's still some slow, clunky build with that. And as such, Lucas Krom is kind of dated. And this has been his ability from like way back when. He's never changed. You don't see him in a ton of decks because he's just a kind of a surprise legendary. He's a legendary that some people might use for a bit just to make you deal with him, because if you don't, you have to worry about maybe having a Kaban on your next turn. But he's not scary. He's not as scary as some of these other cards. Neutrino Irradiator. This is actually still a good card. It received a buff that made it like ridiculously good, and then it got nerfed, and it's still okay. Rally it jams and stuns an enemy troop. For a while there, it had Rally and Relentless, which was ridiculous. But for Rally, I can jam and stun a random enemy troop. So, boom, I hit the board. I'm going to jam whatever big thing you've got, hopefully. Unless you've got multiple troops on the board, then it's kind of a crapshoot. And then I'm going to stun it. So now you still have a 5/10 to deal with, and that card, whatever it was, is half the value that it used to be. This is a nice little pinch if you don't have removal, like good, reliable removal, or you want to stun things a little bit more and keep things on the board. Alpha Legion might want this if they don't have access to their score, their legendary card. This is like a really downgraded replacement for it. But that's a possibility. It's a great way to shut down anything with Ward, Dark Martyr, Gunnarsson from the Space Wolves. It's a really good way to shut those things down. Or if you're playing your opponent's playing Erebus and they build up that awesome Warp Rift, and then you're like, okay, well, let's just return it back to a 3/3 and it's stunned to boot. That's a way to go about it. A surex is not something you put in your decks. Please don't. Please don't do that. Please don't put that in your decks. I think what we want to see here with this card is better stats to make it not Melgatorable, but it really shouldn't be. This is a really strong ability. You're giving up almost all your energy, but every turn you're dealing 6 damage to all enemies, which is more than it's attacking. It has shield. This card gets generated by Forge Complex, and then that's when you get frustrated if it shows up and you have no response to it. Or in a draft, maybe if you're playing an event and you draft one of these and you have some other draft options that you know, or it's a hard removal limited event where not a lot of factions have hard removal access, that's worth considering. Maybe drafting it, maybe, but I wouldn't recommend putting it in your deck unless you want to get a little frustrated when you throw down a 312 and it gets returned to your hand by a 2 energy troop. Forge World, I've been playing with this a little bit lately. This is not bad. I like it with the Death of Innocence in the same way that I talked about the Tagmata formation. But I also like the fact that unlike Tagmata, which is reliant on how many troops your opponent has, this is just straight going to give you 4 Mechanicum vehicles that cost 6 or less. So you're going to get 4. You might get the Photon Thruster, or that's infantry. That's right. You might get the Eta Kappa. You might get the Chimu or the Alpha Omega. There's some good stuff at 6. That's great. At 5, there's still some good stuff. Gamma Psi, Theta 11. At 4 and 3, you kind of get like, oh, I wish I didn't get the Castellax or the Svarog. Please don't give me the don't give me the Surveillance Robot for 10 energy. Don't give me 4 of those. Most of the time, I'm getting at least 2 5 or 6 costers. So the value is fair. Which is good so far. I mean, it's all random, and I think maybe if you played 100 games of it, maybe you could figure out a better median in there somewhere. But it's fun, especially if you've got Death of Innocence and those are coming out with the Mark of Chaos. That being said, none of those are ones, aside from Vorax, none of those are ones that do anything for you when they hit. You might get a frontline, that's nice, but you're not going to get the rally effect from Chimu. You're not going to get that heal. You're not going to get anything else except for possibly a flanking troop. And if you want flanking desperately, you're better off just playing Forge Fade. So, keep that in mind. We talked about Kaban Machine. Maniple Tau is one of the highest attack cards in the game. I don't know, there might be one at 14. I could be wrong. But I think as far as troops go, this is... Oh, no, yeah, there's the Devourer Worlds. There's a 15. This is a 12. That's still really high with 8 health. Problem is this costs 10 and has no game text. Don't put this in your deck. If you get it generated by the Forge Complex, sure, throw it down if you're able to thwart your opponent. But don't put this in your deck. You'll be hurting yourself. You'll be sad the fact that you did. Last but not least, I feel like we got to talk about the counterattack. The Mechanicum counterattack is really nice. The whole Mechanicum Warlord concept is energy refilling, or energy abundance, because they've got their Forge Worlds. So the counterattack goes with that. It refills you 1 energy. It's a nice way to kind of play not quite ahead of curve, but almost, or use 2 troops that would have come out 1 turn after the other. If you're able to play them both in the same turn and get a boost, the classic play with Proctor that really made people demand that Proctor get nerfed. And by the way, this is a belated shout out to Buff Proctor Guy. If anybody remembers Buff Proctor Guy, for a year he was just please buff Proctor, and then they buffed him, and then they nerfed him, and at that point I think his soul was broken. But the classic Proctor play is to play Rotau at 2 energy, and then use his ability to make another vehicle, or use his ability to make a vehicle and then use the counterattack, and then play a Delta Psi that's now a 3/3 frontline, and you've got your vehicle that's protected. And that's just using the counterattack on turn 1. You could use the counterattack later in the game with Scoria and his ability and basically refill 3 energy. You could use it with Caliber Hal, who's throwing bodies away and gain some additional energy, or the Myrmidon Destructor, who's getting energy when you're killing enemy troops. It's a good counterattack. It really is. You just gotta know how to play it. Beware. Don't just throw it away just because you got one. You want to play a Mechandrite. Unless you're playing that Mechandrite to really help lock the board down, it's really best to play it when you can maybe get an extra body on the board, a troop, or something that's going to bolster your buys. If you throw down a Laz Taul and at the same time that you played another troop with that counterattack, that's really nice because there's just synergy there. So, I hope this has been helpful for you. If you've stuck around this long, if you've watched all 3 of the card-by-card videos, please recommend them to folks if you found them helpful. Give them a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. Tell me what you think about the Mechanicum cards in general. Let's not limit it to cards 7, 8. What are your favorite ones? Warlords, troops. What Mechanicum cards do you wish you could see used more because they just are flat on their face? Do you want to see Vulture X return back to where it is? Do you want to harbor for the days of Termite Drill? I know there's a Lodge master out there somewhere who really just wants that Termite Drill to be the best. The best around. But, I don't know if we're ever going to see that. Just tell me what you think. I'm curious. I've gone on about the Mechanicum at length, and now I feel even more connected with the machine. My fingertips have merged into my mouse. You can't see it right now, but I guarantee you my oculi have become bionic. I might rust in the rain. So be careful. Be careful what you wish for, guys. Mechanicum troops are done, card by card. That's it for me. Until next time, keep playing Legions. We'll talk to you later.